Realm Royale is a game that's been out for over 5 years now, and it came out at the height of the Fortnite craze, and when it released, it was just riding the wave of popularity because it had over 100,000 concurrent players at the time. And the game was in the perfect spot to be considered one of the greats. You know, at the time people were calling it the top 3 most popular Battle Royale of all time. But the developers really dropped the ball with Realm Royale with back-to-back horrendous updates that caused, the players to abandon the game 2 months after release. And we'll talk about what these updates that killed the game were. But for the next 4 years after release, Realm Royale would see consistent losses in player base, so all the signals were kind of just pointing to the fact that Realm Royale was just gonna die. It was just gonna shut down and it was just gonna be abandoned. It was a hit it and quit it, one-hit wonder. But then Realm Royale got a second chance because at the height of what I'm going to refer to as the great sequeling, I don't know if you guys remember Overwatch becoming Overwatch 2, Warzone becoming Warzone 2, Super People, not many people know about Super People, but that one also turned into Super People 2. So Realm Royale saw this and decided to do a complete overhaul of the game and sort of capitalize on the opportunity of games rebranding themselves, and they released Realm Royale Reforged, where the developers promised that they fixed everything that they messed up with originally with the game and brought back all the mechanics that people and the players just, loved about the game in the first place. But did that rebrand actually succeed in reviving the game that went from 100,000 players, or was Reforging Realm Royale the final nail in the coffin for the game? Let's start off by talking about launch. Realm Royale blew up during alpha phase, not during beta or full release, so it blew up really early into the game's development cycle. And according to an article I read about how the company felt about the game blowing up so early, no one in Hi-Rez was really ready for it. No one was really expecting it. Hi-Rez had the game in its early stages and they were still trying to figure out what they wanted Realm Royale to become in the first place, because originally Realm Royale started off being a knockoff game mode of Paladins, the hero shooter, and the game mode got so popular that eventually the studio decided to make it its own thing. And because Realm Royale was still in its alpha phase, then the developers were going through a little bit of an identity crisis, trying to figure out what they wanted to do with the game. They got a little too comfortable making constant huge changes to the game's core mechanics. And the response from the player base was honestly they just could not keep up with all the changes. Every few days you had paragraphs of patch notes of all the things they were doing inside Realm Royale. Like for example, when the game first released, the game had a class system, which is a pretty cool concept because you can play as a warrior, as a mage, engineer, so the game had those MMORPG elements to it, and that feature added a lot more layers to the game that made it interesting, along with class-specific weapons and abilities. So that's a fun concept to add into the video game, right? Because you have a bunch of different classes. It makes the gameplay more interesting, right? Well, Hi-Rez removed the class system 2 months after Realm Royale released. They decided to scrap the class system, which is what made Realm Royale unique in the first place, only to add the class system back 2 months after that. And they also had an armor system that eventually they just scrapped and replaced with runes, and they also had a talent system too. The point is that there was too many updates happening and too fast, and the player base at the time just really couldn't keep up with the updates. So they were never really given a good reason to stay in the game and keep playing it, and every update it just felt like you were playing an entirely different game altogether. And if you look at the Steam charts, you can see that the player base just started dropping and dropping. Realm Royale was unable to keep the players engaged and interested, and in January of 2020, the game entered what's called maintenance mode. A lot of players consider Realm Royale dead in the water at this point. The updates stopped coming in and the developers just went radio silent. People really thought that this was the end of Realm Royale, a game that started off with a huge bang and was just slowly withering until the fire died out. Until August 2022. After over 2 years of radio silence, Hi-Rez announced Realm Royale Reforged. This was the triumphant return of the game. The changes in the core gameplay in this update were so massive that it actually warranted adding a Reforged to the name. And they promised that they fixed all the terrible choices that they made throughout the year, and they added all the cool stuff that the players originally liked about the game. In the patch notes of the update, they announced that they were bringing back mechanics from Realm Royale's early stages that the players loved, while bringing upon the improvements and features that the players are familiar with today. So this really was the big moment for Realm Royale, the massive return of the game that once stood at the top 3 most played Battle Royales of all time. This was their moment to shine once again. So to list out the changes that they implemented in the update, they brought back the armor system in the game so you can find armor in game and equip it to get different bonuses. They brought back class locking, so class abilities and class weapons were now restricted behind the class that they were meant for, because for a time you had mages running around with battle axes and warriors running around and flying with swords. So, honestly that one just seemed obvious to me. I don't know why they took it out in the first place. So they brought in new weapons and class dress, and they brought back the engineer class, which they removed from the game at some point. And over the course of the next few months, they would also be adding a lot more content into the game. So like a team deathmatch mode that they promised, a new weapons into the game, a mastery system, and an entirely different map for you to play on. So with all of these new and reforged changes that they made into Realm Royale, everyone must have been super excited to play the game again, right? They must have come back flocking in droves to start getting into Realm Royale Reforged. So did they actually do that? Did the player base actually react to the way people were expecting them to, and welcome back Realm Royale with open arms? Well, if you go ahead and look at the Steam charts, and let me clarify here that this only counts for PC gaming. It doesn't count for console players, but you know, you can get the general idea out of this. The game went from 1,000 concurrent players on Steam pre-reforging to about 3,600 players after reforging. A pretty underwhelming number in terms of a boost of player base following such a huge update. I mean, it is a lot more players than they had before the reforging, so I guess, you know, they had a positive there, but to make matters worse, the numbers didn't keep going up. With each passing update, they didn't even like maintain their numbers they had pre-reforging, so it's like they almost made it worse. So they released this massive update that completely changed the scope of the game, but now the game is doing worse than it was doing pre-reforging. So, yeah. And I know that this number doesn't really include console players, but the downtrend is pretty obvious at this point. You can pretty much see the direction in which the game is headed towards. And if you take a look at their Reddit page, which, big mistake first of all, the comments that you see on each post, almost all of them just talk about how the game is basically on life support, and how everyone's just trying to figure out what exactly happened to Realm Royale. What is the final nail in the coffin? What exactly, you know, made the players leave in the first place? We already know what happened there, but like what happened that after the reforging of the game, after they decided to actually listen to the player base, did the players actually not like the game afterwards? Was it actually just a big mistake? Did they actually listen to the wrong people? Everyone's trying to figure out what exactly spelled the doom for Realm Royale. Was it a lack of maintenance, or just straight up advertising issues? Or maybe there were not enough big streamers playing it. You know, there's 1,000 reasons as to why it happens. No one really knows for sure. But the thing is that it did. That's like the fact. It did happen. The player base did drop dramatically after the release of Realm Royale Reforged. And ultimately, whatever it is that happened that caused the downfall of Realm Royale, we might never know, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't helped by the fact that Hi-Rez was going through a massive restructuring, laying off a bunch of employees, consolidating a bunch of studios together, you know, a lot of chaos happening backstage at Hi-Rez Studios, so that inner turmoil maybe had something to do with it as well, but the fact that they were going through all that chaos and still managed to release a completely reworked and reforged update to Realm Royale, only to have it do a dead cat bounce and then just continue to fade away into obscurity, that's sad, man. That is really, really sad. Because ultimately, I always thought it was such a cool battle royale. You know, the concept of it, you see a lot of other shooter games just starting to implement, you know, that hero shooter aspect into the game because it is fun. There's so many layers that adds to the game other than just straight up gunplay and movement. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, Realm Royale, I'm pretty sure it's not coming back from this. This is just a personal opinion, but what do you think? Leave a comment down below. And that's the case of the battle royale that had one of the biggest launches anyone's ever seen, to be considered in the top 3 alongside Fortnite and PUBG, only to just lose it all in the end. That was the case of Realm Royale. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.